Hi.
Never give you another minute or a chance for you to hurt me. Say you're sorry.
For sustainable development, it is what we equip our learners with, the knowledge, the skills, the attitudes that we give them.
Is sustainability a luxury when we talk about extreme poverty?
If you're educating for humanity and then after you leave the education system, our economic system is still very predatory.
But we can start by sharing what we have done.
ESD should be imparted to people not just as a body of knowledge, but as an approach to make changes.
選択が意識の問題なので、それはすごく重要だと思うんです。
We need to find more local solutions in the community, and schools are an integral part of that community.
Mais l'impact massif et ponctuel sur le moyen terme ou le plus court terme, c'est la communauté qui peut l'apporter.
Porque es importante la comunidad para obtener un resultado efectivo. La escuela sola no puede trabajar en función del cumplimiento exitoso de todas las metas que nos proponemos.
So we wanted to highlight the importance of non-formal education and how it achieves sustainable development, especially in countries that are in conflict.
It is a fact that SDGs, all 17 of them put together, are not just opportunities, but there are challenges for governments to reach them also.
Y es un desafío precisamente por los compromisos que deben asumir las naciones en su retórica de decisión política, práctica.
The future of ESD is quite critical for the future of SDGs as a whole.
The challenge here is how do we get ESD into the mainstream?
But with every challenge comes an opportunity.
I think that starting from there, we can really do a great work together today.
stop people dumping rubbish in the water and making their mom or dad drive them to school and walk to school.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Jade, j'ai 5 ans. Il faut pas gaspiller l'eau, arracher les arbres et donner les joujoux et les vêtements aux enfants qui n'en ont pas. 僕の名前は吉田葵です。6歳です。僕はゴミとタバコが下にたくさん落ちてるので、僕はタバコをタバコのゴミ箱に置いて、で捨てて、でゴミをゴミ箱に入れればいいと思います。
من الإمارات أتمنى أن دول العالم تكون متوحدة وأنهم يكونون مترابطين متعاونين بالسلامة.
Io mi chiamo Lale e ho 5 anni. Io voglio fare la passeggiata e giocare con i bimbi, ma poi guardare la tele perché c'è tanta corrente.
Today we will be talking about how to save the planet, and we would like to make sure that all the money has been shared equally and everybody has money so that nobody is on the street.
Voor de planeet wil ik recyclen.
En ik wil schone energie gebruiken.
My name's Brian. I live in England, and I save the planet so the bad guys don't kill us. Takahashi Rihara 4歳です。きれいにするにはお花をいっぱい咲くにいいです。いいと思いますよ。
Pour conserver la planète et tout l'environnement, j'aimerais que mon père arrête de fumer, que ma mère aussi, et qu'ils arrêtent tous deux de picoler.
My name's Iris and I'm 7 and I'm from Hong Kong. To save the planet, don't waste money. Ik probeer de arme mensen genoeg geld en eten te laten krijgen. Denchuchewa alce sungani bueno mazi waukondo. Me gustaría que el planeta no estuviera contaminado, haciendo que los coches produzcan menos humo.
Vivo em Angola e para preservar o planeta não deixaria as lâmpadas acesas desnecessariamente.
Pour protéger la planète, je voudrais vous dire que les éoliennes c'est cool parce que ça ne pollue pas, mais ça fait de l'électricité dans les maisons. Il faut mettre pas beaucoup d'électricité, sinon ça va polluer un peu. Et puis si la planète est trop polluée, il y a beaucoup de trucs qui risquent de mourir. Donc il vaudrait mieux pas polluer. Mais il y a beaucoup de gens qui polluent. Moi je retrouve plein de canettes de Coca-Cola, de trucs comme ça.
Thank you for listening to our message.
But what will it look like? With a world population at nearly 8 billion people and dwindling resources, UNESCO believes the answer lies with each and every one of us, and with education. Global challenges like poverty and climate people at all levels to bring about real change. That's why ESD is connected to all the 17 Sustainable Development Goals adopted by the global community. UNESCO, as the lead UN agency for ESD, coordinates a global action program on ESD. This builds on the work of the UN Decade of Education for Sustainable Development and goes further to scale up actions. UNESCO works with a network of 90 key partners from government, civil society, academia, and private sector to accelerate progress towards sustainable development. The Global Action Program aims to transform education and learning so that the door is open for everyone to access knowledge, skills, and values they can put into practice towards a sustainable future. All actions need a plan. UNESCO works with its partners to develop strong ESD policies at national and international level. Kenya and Costa Rica, for example, were supported to develop strong ESD policies that form the backbone for action. Sustainability works best when it's lived every day. Learning about sustainability is so much easier in a school or on a green campus where teachers have been empowered to share SD values and competencies with learners. A holistic approach looks at changing all aspects of a school to reduce its ecological footprint, including governance, teaching content and methods, facilities, and it means mobilizing different partners around the school. Teachers are change agents. They have the power to involve learners in active learning, but first, they must be equipped themselves with the knowledge, skills, and motivation to inspire learners and to deliver education that is relevant and responsive to global challenges. UNESCO believes that sustainability starts with teachers and actively supports teacher education institutions to design and deliver training on ESD at secondary school level. Creative and innovative solutions are needed to meet the global challenges and build the future. Young people have the best motivation of all to create a better future. UNESCO has set a clear goal to empower youth leaders worldwide who will inspire their peers to take actions for a more sustainable future. Sustainability starts at home and grows through local communities and cities. Urban and rural communities are one of the critical drivers for sustainable development, and their efforts merit greater support. UNESCO and key partners engage cities and communities in the vitally important conversation about how to accelerate the implementation of ESD and the 17 SDGs at local level. The challenges are huge, but so are the gains. ESD opens the way to greater opportunities, helping us safeguard our planet. But getting there requires change. Real change doesn't come from technology or regulations or cash. Real change starts with people and a revolution in the way we think, live, and act together. UNESCO believes ESD and the Global Action Program can help bring about this change. Join us to promote ESD and SDGs. Be part of the change and help shape our shared future.
The UNESCO Japan Prize rewards projects that practice education for sustainable development, or ESD, in an innovative and exceptional way. Every year, it is awarded to 3 organizations or individuals from around the world. For 2018, the winners are the Namib Desert Environmental Education Trust from Namibia, the Let's Do It Foundation from Estonia, and Yayasan Calabria from Indonesia. Nadit was chosen for its Nadit Center on Namib Rand. Located deep in the Namib Desert, it offers hands-on immersion in ESD for school children, educators, parents, as well as for entire community groups. Focusing on energy, waste, and water, Nadit also helps young people overcome poverty. Visitors learn firsthand about biodiversity, a sustainable lifestyle, and the balance between humans and nature. Learning means not just seeing and hearing, but doing and living. Nadit Center has already hosted and trained over 13,000 children and adults.
I feel very amazed. I learned how to save energy, how to save water, how to cook on a solar panel. It's very exciting and I have to learn new things and to teach others about what I have learned here at Nadit.
Let's Do It is awarded for its projects World Cleanup Day and Keep It Clean. These grassroots initiatives address the global problem of mismanaged waste and stimulate social and environmental change. Local networks organize cleanups all over the world and help communities develop long-term waste management plans. A mobile app maps waste and supports individual initiatives that educate on sustainable lifestyles. In 10 years, World Cleanup Day has evolved from a national cleanup to a worldwide movement with millions of volunteers in 150 countries.
So a program for segregation at source, recycling has to be there because this change of mindset, behavior, and trash is not just automatic. It has to be lived.
Yayasan Calabria wins the prize for its program, Environmental Education for the Heart of the Coral Triangle. The Calabria is a 34-meter-long ship that brings interactive marine conservation education to more than 100 remote coastal villages of West Papua. Staffed with local educators, this floating platform offers intensive education programs to children and their communities. Through small group lessons, field trips and games, participants
about the behavior changes they are seeing. This does not only apply to the kids, but also to the parents themselves.
Funded by the Government of Japan, the prize supports the UNESCO Global Action Programme on ESD. The program and the prize aim to incite and scale up ESD actions that transform individuals and societies.
Good morning, everyone. Prevent, can you hear me?
Good morning, Baba.
Good morning, Caleb. Good morning, everyone. Colleagues, welcome to our webinar, another exciting webinar, Living Heritage, Education for Sustainable Development and Quality Education. Thank you so much for joining us. I know most of the colleagues will be joining us. Go ahead. This is now 6 minutes past 11. I think we should start. My name is Charles Chikunda. I'm reaching out to you from UNESCO Regional Office of Southern Africa in Harare. I'm tempted to put my video on, but my internet has been misbehaving, so I'll do it at a later stage. For today's webinar, which is very important, if I'm to give you a very short background in Southern Africa, most of our ministries of education in Southern Africa, they've changed or they've transformed their basic education curricula to include or to focus on what they call heritage-based education. You find that in all the SADC countries. So this webinar is very useful to us. This webinar is very important to us. And we have assembled what I can call the experts that I know in terms of heritage to grace this occasion and to share with us this morning, what do we mean by heritage? How can it enhance our education? How can it improve our teaching practices? How can it become part of the ESD agenda? Now, without wasting much of your time, I would want to invite and introduce the first speaker, who is Dr. Swongile Masuku. She's well known in this part of the world, and she's well known to SST because of the work that she has done in ESD and Living Heritage. She is a PhD holder from Rhodes University. She's currently working at Sol Plaatje University in Northern Cape in South Africa. She lectures on, listen to that, integrated heritage management, heritage practice, and work-based heritage learning. I think it speaks volume. She's the chairperson of Amazon National Museum of Literature, council member for Nelson Mandela Museum, and a member of the panel of advisors for the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture on Indigenous Knowledge and Living Treasures. She has worked with the 1972 Convention concerning the protection of the world cultural and natural heritage, 2001 protection of the underwater cultural heritage, 2003 Convention on safeguarding of the intangible cultural heritage. We call her SIBO in Southern Africa. So Swengile, without taking much of your time, please take it away. You have got 15 minutes to share with the SST participants. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Sanibonani colleagues, sanibonani Maswati Lamahle. I'm so happy to hear people from the land of Eswatini. First of all, thank you very much. It's always exciting to be with colleagues in this sector. And David, it's nice to see you there. Okay, without further ado, I'll just, let me see if this is sharing. I usually use Teams. Can you please assist me with sharing the slide? Where do I go? Or share screen?
Yes, the green one.
Yes. And I must make it big.
Yes.
Is that fine?
It's not yet on slideshow, but we can see it. Try to put it on slide show. That's good.
Okay. And I need to get rid of myself here. Yeah.
Not completely.
Okay, I'm just going to, first of all, I've got this picture here, which begins to define really what we're looking at in tangible heritage. If you look at this young lady, you are seeing the complexities of what intangible heritage is. You see a cross and you see she's of Wambo. And so it's brings out some of the contradictions, some of the complexities, but it also makes us acknowledge that intangible cultural heritage is not also stuck in the past. It goes through a process of reconstituting, also based on context where one is at. Now I don't know how, okay. Yeah, and then I want us to look at where is the domains where intangible cultural heritage is located. It's usually located in oral traditions, and language is one of the main vehicles of intangible heritage. And in those languages, we also find that expressions that cannot be articulated in words are transformed into onomatopoeic symbols, like a person who's very, very sick. When we say, how is that person? We say, it's a Siswati word. And of course, if we want to emphasize on truth, we say, he's talking the truth, bam, 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 bam. And of course, words like motorbike, because of the sound that comes from them, we say stu-tu-tu. So that begins to show us that language is also accommodating, and not only accommodating other languages, but also represents sounds into languages. So you also have ICH compartmentalized in measurements for symbols. For instance, in Siswati, if you want to talk about a dog, the size of a dog, you say the dog is this tall. But for a child, you say the child is this tall. So it begins to differentiate there. Of course, pointing as well, when we point, we grave as a sign of respect, we point with the fist. And of course, you also find ICH located in language again and in tails. And you find the synonymous in Africa, where in Ghana, you have what is called Ananse, and in Zulu and Swazi tales, you have got Ukalulu Unokwacha. So these are some of the areas that you find that ICH is located in. Some of the social practices and rituals and practices that are concerning nature and the universe, you find that in order to interpret the season that is coming up, we use animals or plants that are growing at that particular time. And traditional crafts as well, such as your fishing crawls, are also practices that are passed from one generation to another. And of course, they've got an environmental component related to them. And it is very important to note that when we talk about intangible heritage, we also find that there's also contradictions, not only contradictions, but that when we deal with intangible culture, we have to be careful and sensitive, because what can be considered as intangible in South Africa and is acceptable might not be considered as intangible heritage and acceptable in another context. So the guideline there is that it needs, when we talk about intangible heritage, it must be compatible with the requirements of mutual respect amongst communities and individuals. And we all know that one of the philosophies and cosmologies that are scattered throughout Africa is that of the humanism, umuntu ngumuntu ngabantu, and these are also captured in some of our sayings, where we say, be kind to a stranger because the foot has no nose. Unyawo aluna mpumulo. We also have some of these humanisms also captured in the way we relate with each other. We, in terms of sharing, we also say that be kind and also be generous to the stranger, no matter how small you have, because brothers can actually share the head of a locust. We also have practices that are supported through ICH, which are related to sustainable development, such as loaning each other of livestock or sharing of seeds. And also the ICH that we need to promote is the one that is compatible with existing international human rights instruments. We have practices that are not compatible, but of course, when we deal with those, particularly in the classroom situation, we need to be sensitive, but at the same time, know that some children or some teachers might have quite a lot of views about them. So these are practices such as virginity testing, forced marriages, banning people declared witches, and ritual murdering. So, and in the Ghanaian civil law, education law, you find that that law discourages humanizing cultural acts while enshrining rights of belief, which are captured in the Constitution. So, of course, the sensitive issues when it comes to LGBTQIA issues, where you find that the Constitution in South Africa accommodates them, and they're also LGBTQ issues, you may find that they are locked in spirituality, where when we talk about Sangoma, you find that they have a male living in them, but they are females. So as you talk about LGBTQ issues, you also need to be careful, because in other countries, the practicing all LGBTQIA cultures is not encouraged, and it is criminalized. When we deal with ICH, we also need to recognize that there are challenges in dealing with ICH. However, as we deal with ICH, particularly in the school context, we need to recognize that learners may find dealing with ICH as embarrassing because they're also excited about popular cultures of music, etc. So we need to try and look at ways of integrating it in the curricula so that they feel that they are also included. And it is important, of course, that we also deal with teachers, focusing on teacher educators and community educators, and carefully choose aspects that will be in the curriculum. And we know that we are also living in a highly technological period of time where we also frown upon certain artistic expressions. So you find that graffiti is frowned upon, but we're encouraging rock art, and the kids might feel that, oh, this is old-fashioned, and they might want to use a media that is electronic and all. So we should not shy away from integrating technology when we deal with intangible cultural heritage. There's also, as we look at ICH, we need to look at ICH as also an interacting dimension of the political ways of thinking, social ways of living, integrate biodiversity, and also include economics out of them, because people will say, why am I going to be practicing ICH if it's not going to put food on the table? Why am I practicing ICH if it's not going to aid in health issues? Why am I practicing ICH if it's not going to make sure that I have a good house to live in? So we need to consider those issues. So when we look at ICH, we also need to look at ICH not only in dislocated from our everyday lives, and in dealing with it as teachers and teacher educators, we also need to recognize that the home plays a particular role in promoting ICH, particularly storytelling and dealing with storytelling and encouraging children to collect some of the stories from their elders, because locked in those stories, there's indigenous wisdom locked in it, and elders have kept and perpetuated the stories because young people have something to learn from it. And also within the community, it would be very great to encourage community storytelling festivals where ICH is also used to unlock creativity amongst our people, because creativity is an exciting aspect, particularly for young people, and also the coming together and sharing these stories is very, very important in terms of aiding communication and also just as a social grouping for young people. And you find that in some of the protected areas like Kruger, you have elders that actually run some of the camps called Imbewu, and they teach learners how to read the stars, how to make fires, how to identify birds, etc. So excursions are also very, very important. When we look at ICH, we also need to look at why is it important? What is it for? What does it aid? What does it aid? ICH is very, very important. For instance, if you would, let me say, because when we look at conservation management plans, we're not only looking at conservation management plans in the context of a park, but we may look at a conservation and management plan in the context of your own community. How do you come up with a grazing area? How do you protect a grazing area? How do you look after the area that has graves and all sorts of aspects? So in terms of land use practices, either at school or even at home, ICH would aid. And it also assists in the revival of lost and forgotten practices. When we look at permaculture and that whole movement of resurrecting some of these knowledges has got something to do with it. Radio programs are also important in promoting ICH, because even as we look now, right now at talking through Zoom, but how do we begin to connect with people in the local in local communities and also to be able to share with them, is to go back and look at practices such as community gatherings, but also the very important medium, which is radio. So even though we may consider these as modern technologies, they are very important in sharing ICH. And also looking at the formation of clubs, young people's clubs, and sharing what is happening in their communities in terms of ICH. I don't know what happened there, but I think, I don't know what happened there, but I think those are just some of the aspects that I wanted to share in terms of ICH. I don't know how yes. Yeah, I think I'll stop there. So these are some of the important aspects that I just wanted to share in a nutshell on ICH. So I'll welcome questions afterwards. Thank you, colleagues.
Is Charles there? Charles, are you there?
Hello, I'm back. I was kicked out a bit. Thank you so much. I didn't hear the last bit of your discussion, but I hope colleagues got that. Thank you so much. If you have questions, please put them on the chat. We're going to have some few minutes at the end to go through the questions and so forth. I hope you can hear me, Privan.
Yes, hello? We're hearing you, Charles. Yeah.
Good. Let's move on to the next speaker, who is Dr. Caleb Madikonsa. We call him
Hello, Charles, are you still there?
We can hear you, Caleb, and we can see your screen if you can go to full screen. Good morning. Welcome.
Morning, Prof. Thank you so much. Thanks, colleagues, for inviting me to this session. I'm here to share my experiences of one starting point of thinking about ICH, living heritage, but I approached it from the notion of indigenous knowledge practices, which is those things that people do as part of their living, which tend to sustain their lives. And that's how it fits into my notion of sustainability. And if you look at why heritage practices in the curriculum, why our education curricula are focusing more on heritage, it is looking more at what has sustained our communities over the years, and valuing that and bringing it into existence, because we have been looking up to the new forms of education and putting these at the forefront, and not realizing that we are situated in an African context, and we need to grow out of that African context in order to flourish. And all our innovations are supposed to be coming out of that. So in science education, we need to be thinking about that. In TVET, we need to be thinking more about that, about our culture, about where we are living. Of course, it is very difficult to find indigenous knowledge, which is because of the selections, the appropriations, and the subjugations that have taken place over the hundreds of thousands of years of colonial modernity. But if there is any that we can put together and make use of, probably it is time we think about it. Curricula, education curricula are realizing that we could actually realize the potential of our children. So we do not necessarily teach cultural heritage in schools, but we teach content. And then that content is actually supposed to integrate or to bring in indigenous and cultural knowledge. So it is important for us to always think about where the learners are coming from, so that we can make a link between their homes and where we are, so that they are able to use that knowledge. Even though the school culture, the book-based school culture or formal education school culture in the school could be slightly different from the home culture, we should be able to bridge that gap through the indigenous knowledge practices and cultural practice that those learners are engaged in. So I looked at the science, but basically Sibongile talked about the reasoning behind the interest in ICH in order to enhance relevance of learning, promoting humanizing tendencies of educational experience, and to look at ICH as starting point for building science content concepts, because these people are living in a context where they are using this knowledge, but may not be able to explain it. I remember Prof. O'Donoghue saying one time that science is explanatory. It's an explanatory science. It is an explanatory background. And whereas practices are actually what people do, they are the lived experiences. So science explains, and how can you bring together that knowledge that people are using into the classroom and be able to explain it so that your learners can understand better. And we need to find ways of demystifying science knowledge by bringing it at home, so that it doesn't become laboratory-based or classroom-based, but it comes into the community and be part of the learners' experiences, so that they continue to search new meanings through relating with it. And Sibongile expressed that our children want to be more westernized. What if we bring in value of what we do today, what they are doing, so that they appreciate themselves, they identify themselves as Africans, of course, who will be getting formal knowledge in the school. And there are many innovations that are taking place, but one has to relate to the indigenous practices. There are people who are selling pre-cooked pap or ugali, and they are making business out of it. And there are people who are making ready-made, you know, that ready-made mealie meal, which makes porridge, instant porridge. And how do they make it? And all of that, one has to tap into the living heritage. And all of that is part of what we term situated learning, getting into the situated learning and experience the growth from that practices, those practices. And we also need to think about pedagogical practices that integrate ICH, learning through doing, demonstration, learning from knowledgeable others, storytelling that Sibongile has emphasized, and so on. So ICH has potential to move into that space. And if we can look more into what our people do, which I want to call indigenous knowledge practices, then we should be able to help the decolonization process, where we are thinking about knowledge not being isolated from the learners, and then building a stronger form of understanding and innovation, because that's where innovation lies. You look at what is happening today and then innovate it into more sustainable, more useful, faster, etc., and more economic modes of production and use. So these are skits you find on WhatsApp, and people are asking, what do you call this in English? But looking at it as a science teacher, I said, but how can I use that? This is something that is taking place when my mother is cooling porridge for my siblings. I've noticed my mother, I don't know whether she did it for me because I wasn't yet aware, but I saw her doing this, cooling tea, cooling porridge for my siblings, my younger siblings. And then what does this mean? How can I take this into the classroom? Because this is my experience at home. How can I take this into the classroom? And which concepts can I use to teach? I can think about heat. I can think about all that smoke-like dispersion you see there. I can think about the states of water, states of matter. And this is part of a simple activity, which can then be brought into the classroom. I visited, if you go into many rural areas, you will find a round house, a round building. And if you look at this round building, then you ask yourself questions. Many of us culturally will have a round hut, which is the kitchen, and there will be a square or a rectangular building, corrugated building, which is the bedroom. And then the questions are, what technological knowledge is involved there? What physical science knowledge is involved in that? What economic science knowledge is involved in constructing that structure? What economic and physical sciences, technology are involved in using this structure? There is a lot of knowledge that is embedded in just that structure. Could one not just go and start off from there and grow out? What are the social, I didn't bring in the social sciences. What are the social sciences and the humanities that are involved with that? If you want to discuss gender, how can you use this hat as the starting point and then expand from there? If you want to discuss issues around violence, family relationships, how do you use this? And if you look behind that building, there would be, there are drawings. And what do those take you? This would be a home. How do they take you into a social sciences classroom? So these are some of the thoughts. Making a fire. What does it mean in science? What do the pillars, why do we have pillars there? Why do you not have those rocks right round, but the pillars are located at different points? And there is a specific way of making a fire. Fire making is specific. I was taught to make fire in a certain way, where it allows, you don't start by putting the pot on top of those legs, those stones. You start by making a fire, and when the fire is already made, then you can put the pot on top. And why is that? And when we are now talking about science, we talk about carbon dioxide, we talk about the movement of air, etc., etc. So I have an explanation of one activity that I looked at in the rural areas, which was winnowing. And winnowing, I associated it, when I looked at what was happening, I looked at it to include density, convection currents, and heat transfer. So, and then there were other activities that I looked at. But if I looked at, I focused on just one in terms, because of time, I focused on winnowing. Winnowing is separation of grain from chaff during this dry season. The mature ladies of the home prepare a platform on the ground, and then they make a fire on one end. And then when there is a breeze, then they can winnow. They don't need a fire. But when it is quiet and the breeze is very low, they make a fire at one end of that platform, and then that fire generates a breeze. And whilst they are doing that, they also sing. I think it's something in the tradition, they sing. And my mother-in-law used to sing for me and would sing my name, because they would say, who of my sons-in-law would like alcohol? Because the grain that they were preparing, some of it would be used to prepare alcohol. And then who of my sons would love alcohol? And out of the names of the sons of the in the homes, their own biological sons and sons-in-law, the ones who love alcohol a lot, that traditional beer, would actually cause a stronger wind to blow, and for them to have grain for making beer. And this, of course, is in a traditional setting, and you observe that. But when you look at it in the lab, it shows you that there is something related to it, which is the pipe experiment. And when we are in the lab, at times we do have this, but at times we don't have. What if a teacher were to use that experience of learners observing their parents, or even involved in winnowing on a quiet day, and then relate it to heat transfer? When the fire is made, just like the candle, it hits the air, which rises, and when the air rises, it draws, the other air with the smoke comes in and goes out, and it shows that air expands and rises. And that is the same thing happening when the old lady is winnowing, where the air around the fire rises, and the air that comes to replace it is the one that is used for winnowing. And that is one experience of winnowing. So, yes?
1.5 minutes.
Oh, thank you. And I did a change project in the past. In order to come up with that, I did a change project, And this change project had to do with my observations in the field, which I have described. And then I wrote up these observations into vignettes, and I shared the vignettes with my students. Once my students saw these vignettes, read through them, they made input into the vignettes to express how they did it at home. And then they had to use those vignettes to identify concepts in the curriculum that they could relate the practices with. And then they found separation of mixtures is one of those that they could use. They used these, they wrote up lesson plans, which they used in peer teaching activities. And my students seemed to enjoy this because they were taken well into peer teaching activities and as well as micro teaching. However, I found it interesting in that I started talking about other issues such as gender and gender issues and society in general in science. Rather than talking about science alone, I ended up talking about other connections to human life which contribute to sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Caleb. Thank you so much. Colleagues, I know you're typing your questions in the Q&A. Please keep them coming. We have some time at the end to attend to those questions. Now, our next speaker is Dr. Sabai, Daniel Sabai, who is our reference group member in Tanzania. He's a lecturer at DAR. He is currently working there and is supervising PhD students, master students in research around environmental education, ESD, and so forth. His PhD work at Rhodes University was conceived and carried out through a process that allowed coastal communities in east coast of Tanzania to develop contextually user-friendly coastal indicators for monitoring coastal resources after experiencing difficulties in applying adopted scientific indicators. So you can see heritage there at work. Daniel has also participated in various heritage and indigenous knowledge works, including book reviews and reports. As I said, he's currently based at Dar es Salaam University College of Education, which is a constitution of Dar es Salaam University. So Daniel, please take it away and share with us. Thank you. Daniel, are you with us? Hello? Ben, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Charles.
Okay. Daniel, is Daniel in the room? Or is he facing challenges like me? Let me quickly check.
I see him on the platform, but
yeah,
wait,
I'm trying to ask him to unmute, but it seems he's not responding.
Daniel, can you unmute?
Maybe we can move on with Mighty and then see if Daniel can come back.
Hello, Charles. I'm trying to share the documents.
Please go ahead. Thank you. Go ahead.
Can you see it from there?
Yes. Would you want to put it in slideshow?
Right. All right. Hi, everybody.
Good.
I hope you hear me. And if you don't mind, you can see me as well. Let me put on my specs. I'm delighted to be here with you today, and also on the contributions that have been made so far by the colleagues. It appears that some of the comments are really related, but I'm not preempted. So taking you to heritage, myself, I view heritage as a basket I think we all know the basket. You can look at that basket. I did not mean it to be a story basket, and but I think it's going to serve the purpose that I think is intended to. So I have to conceptualize heritage as a basket that is containing input from previous generation and also the future, but also containing the current input as well. This is very true because most of the pedagogical and philosophical works, as we know, we draw them from the past. And I could say we draw them from the basket. And if you have to talk about some of the work like Bandura's work, Theory of Social Theory, we also draw it from the same basket. And the role of the present generation is to shape, to change and transform the input that we draw from that basket to current contextual needs or use. We had a presentation yesterday, which was also looking at how the contexts used may benefit from the input that is coming from other contexts as well. So the basket contains the lessons on the formal education, informal education, non-formal, and a lot of other issues from lifestyles, culture, and that we need to draw, that when we make use of when we are in the teaching and learning. I think that I have to conceptualize the term living heritage because it's different from living the heritage. These are two different things. So when we know them, I think we'll be in a position to locate our presentation today. So what does it mean to live? I mean, living the heritage. To me, it means it's a process where we actively and continuously improve and transform and apply the improving, the knowledge that we have in teaching and learning in the teachers and TVET context or in other contexts that you may think. But when it comes to living the heritage, now to me is to transform our education systems by employing the heritage input that has been passed to our generation and improved further to suit the context. To me, if we work on improving the heritage that we have, we are making it a living heritage. If we don't make use of it, and then it is not living to me. So a living heritage may also mean that we make use of the heritage that we have and how we manipulate its content through transformation, improvement, change, and continuity. The criteria for using the heritage, we all know that in most cases depends on the priority of a country or an institution, or even priority of the teacher, him or herself. But also it depends on the context and the situation and preference. And sometimes we do teaching and learning by dwelling on the status quo, that, okay, this is how we've been doing it, then we have to continue doing it the way, and there's no innovation or creativity that we bring on board to ensure that the heritage is used in the right manner. I also want to look at the concept of education for sustainable development before I can come to some other elements of my presentation. I take it to be the education that is capable of allowing the present generation to gain quality education without compromising the ability of the future generation to access quality education as well. And I think that we may view ESD as a tool or as a mirror or sometimes as a standard for attaining quality education around the globe. If I implement the values of ESD on my side and you do the same, and then I believe that it serves as a standard in one way. But as a mirror, it's a place where you can always go and see if there's something that you need to correct or to improve further, and you correct where is necessary and move forward. So to me, quality education is determined by what the present generation draws from the heritage basket. If you draw the garbage, I know there's a lot of things, including the mistakes and error, but I believe that there's a lot of good things in the basket, which of course I'll give some example as we move on. And for me, quality education must incorporate ESD values. And we know that there are some values that are specified under ESD goal, target number 7, which is human rights, lifestyle, gender aspects, contribution to culture to ESD, cultural diversity, but also cultural contribution to peaceful living. So if the education that we deliver does not incorporate these, so I think we are lacking something. We are not going to achieve the quality education as we are intending to. Now, there are some bottlenecks that limit ESD practices. It means which hinder our process of adopting and using what is in the basket. The first thing is ignoring cultural input. We know that there's a lot of good practices out there. I'm sorry, I would have shown some of the pictures which I shared with the communities, but there was one that I was listening from the elders. They were telling me, I use some of those knowledge as teaching aids or in cementing the teaching and learning process. So sometimes we also ignore the indigenous ecological input, and we prioritize research as universities and also teachers training college. We prioritize research that research work that does not contribute to curriculum improvement. If you ask your colleague how many research work have you produced that have an input to curriculum development, you'll find a gap is there. So that's one of the bottlenecks that limit ESD practices from being emulated, adopted, and applied in the teaching and contexts, in the teachers, colleges, context, teaching context. Hello?
2 minutes, Daniel. 2 minutes to go.
All right, I'm right there in the final. Now I want to show a bit the significance of heritage and ESD. Heritage offers a space to improve and transform and use what has been already passed to us. What I'm saying, it is in the basket. So it helps us to avoid or correct past mistakes and then find a stage towards moving forward. And it also serves as a standard for teaching and learning. That's my contribution about the talk. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Daniel. I like your baskets. I like the baskets metaphor. Thank you very much. Colleagues, keep your questions and comments coming. If you've got specific questions, use the Q&A because it can get lost in the chat box. So thank you very much. Let's move on to our next speaker, who is Maite. She coordinates the program on safeguarding intangible cultural heritage in formal and non-formal education at UNESCO's Living Heritage entity. She has worked in regional and international cooperation in areas such as capacity building for safeguarding intangible cultural heritage, community management processes, popular education, and intercultural education for peace building. I like that part. She has facilitated workshops and capacity building process with civil servants, community managers, teachers, and the youth in different countries. So Maite, welcome to Southern Africa. I know you're far away, Over to you. Please share with the SST participants what you have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's actually a pleasure to have this morning a little trip to Southern Africa from France. I say hello from Paris. I'm very excited to be here actually and to learn from all of you. I think there were many wonderful things said already by Zibongile, Caleb, Daniel, and I wanted actually to follow what Daniel was saying to start this presentation, where I'm also planning to take you to a little journey. I think it's beautiful, this idea of the basket, no? And I was actually thinking, listening to Daniel, this heritage basket, how do we build it? I mean, did we made it by ourselves? How everybody contributed to this basket? Where are the hands that, how do we, is it a basket that we are waving together, that we are constructing and continuing, or do we change the baskets? I don't know, it just triggered a lot of questions to continue thinking about this topic of how actually this living heritage help us connect and build together and learn and connect from our past or present towards our future too. And that's also a lot of community work behind that. So as I said before, I was actually planning to take you to a journey too, because I think that, as everybody has mentioned this before, there is a huge potential on connecting education for sustainable development and the topic of sustainability within the schools and teacher and vocational training, for example, and living heritage, for us, for knowing our culture, for empowering ourselves with our own culture, and from there think our sustainability, but also for establishing bridges and dialogue. And I think Caleb mentioned this idea of bridging and connecting, and also starting from local and reaching the global. So that's why I wanted to take you to a trip with me to Latin America. I'm going to present an experience from there. It's a video of 4 minutes. It's a bit long, but I think it's worth it to explore a little bit more. And then we're going to talk about this more specifically afterwards. So please let me know if you can hear properly. I'm going to start sharing the video. Just a second. Can you see my screen? I think not yet.
Not yet.
Yes, so just a second. I didn't share with sound. Oh yes, something really important before sharing this little video is that because we're talking about the topic of living heritage, there is always, and Bongile emphasized the importance of language. No? There is a little part on the video that is in Quechua, which is the language of this region where I'm taking you to travel with me. And the YouTube translation can't translate that language. So I will at the end explain it, but I think it was important still to listen the language of that region, because Zibongile really beautifully showed how important is language when we talk about this topic. So enjoy the journey.
Anak pacha, kay pacha ukupacha.
Just a second. I realized that the subtitles are not working, so just give me a second. I configured this already, but
Apu Colca Cruz, Apu Sondo, Apu Amanga, Apu Hatun Kenya. Sumagataku na punjaka santo lumikot hasta el saco, amay mata pumisuayaspa.
Sisichakuna Fugyaini. Los programas radiales que se producen en las escuelas andinas permiten que la vida de nuestros pueblos ingresen al aula con respeto, ternura y cariño. Lideresas de AMUAME y otras organizaciones de base elaboran materiales educativos para enseñarnos sus saberes territoriales.
Aylluiko, kay llaqtama, yachaykunata, kawsarichin, rikch'arichin yachaykunata, porque chay kawsaykuna, chay yachaykuna, qonqaripusharqayku.
Kunawan chay trabajasaykumanta willarisayki nuqansi, kunawan chay ruwansi, imas problemas llaqtansipi anchaymanta. Chaymanta ruwallansitaq actuansi, no? Imaynas chay problemata urqurayku hina anchaymanta nuqayku actuarayku, lo que es la contaminación del río.
Ay, balasaqta.
Ay, nuqanqa de plástico, kunami runakuna huch'uwan, kunami wayra apaykushawqa unuman, kunami contaminata unuta.
Ay, masakit por
agua limpia chuya unucha. Que bajas de las alturas de Santa Juana. Eres linda y generosa, agua limpia chuya unucha. Eres linda y generosa, agua limpia chuya unucha.
Las comunicadoras y lideresas de AMUAME han grabado un bonito programa sobre el agua limpia de Santa Juana.
2, 3, va.
¡Adelante,
AMUAME! ¡El Perú ya las está escuchando!
Los programas radiales producidos por niños y adultos se difunden de lunes a viernes en 17 emisoras de las regiones de Cusco y Puno.
Hay tantas cosas que se recolecta gracias a este proyecto. Y lo convertimos en bonitas historias, en bonitos dibujos. ¿Y qué más podría decir? Los niños están contentos de trabajar así.
Yo noto que mis niños ahora no tienen vergüenza de hablar el quechua, no tienen vergüenza de escuchar a otra persona y conversar con otra persona en nuestro mismo idioma.
Cuando van a cosechar la papa, van cargando papa, pero también van yendo los niños y ellas recuerdan mucho cómo era parte de toda esa actividad.
Este proyecto asesora a los profesores y difunde los materiales educativos entre provincias, para que niños y niñas construyan en el cotidiano una forma de vivir diferente, sin discriminación, donde lo más importante es el respeto a lo que son, saben y sienten.
El trabajo con los isichas hace que los niños eleven su autoestima, valoren las fiestas que tiene su comunidad, empiecen a amar lo de ellos primero para después aceptar también las otras culturas.
I hope you enjoyed the little journey. As you saw, probably there is a whole part that was not translated because YouTube doesn't recognize Quechua. So that's also something we should discuss with them about the recognition of other languages. But I wanted to take you through this little journey because I thought this example showed in a really nice way how do we connect all this and how does actually we connect all the things that our colleagues Caleb, Zipungile, Daniel have been already saying. And it's that how do we think about this sustainability, connecting it with the lives of the learners and with where we are living. I think it was Caleb that was saying and asking this question, no? Why isn't that the starting point? And so as you saw in this little video, there's like different actors and different people participating in this experience, in this project. You have the schools, you have the teachers, you have the children, but you also have the families, and you also have the community-based organizations at the local level that are working to protect the territory in this case. So it's really interesting because here we can see that at one point it wasn't translated, but actually the woman that was playing with the water and doing like this, they were doing a radio program on how the water was suffering because it was being contaminated. And that radio program is then heard at school, and the children listen to the radio program, and based on that, they start working around the different disciplines like literature, science, and others, and try to understand what's going on with the water. Why is the water suffering? No? Because the water is actually a spirit in the Andes in Peru. And then they use different tools, as you possibly see. There was like a sort of map at one point. How do we map the territory? And through mapping the territory, we understand more of where we are, where we live in. How do we feel towards this territory? How does this territory speaks? Are we connected to it? Do we listen to it? How have we forgotten this? How did our ancestor connected with this territory, for example? And then we can start identifying also the problems we see in our territory and what is the impact of those problems in our lives. And also connect with the learners' feelings and knowledge, because even if they're 5 years old or 122, they have an experience and a sense of how they relate to this. And I thought it was, they also use another tool at one point. I don't know if you saw this black tool with some little seeds on it. And this is like a traditional way they have to do storytelling. And so the images we put there actually show also the connection and explain some really important traditions and living heritage that goes on in the territory related to agriculture, related to crafts, to making crafts, related to how do we spiritually connect with life around us. So I thought it was really nice to show this, because at the same time we can see some tools, but we can see also the power of connecting this. How do we actually start building and discovering pedagogical materials and strategies and approaches that really correspond to the cultural universe of this of the learners? How does this help us to connect with their experience, with their homes, with their families, with their communities, with their territories? How also this gives a space for them to express themselves and to say how they feel. I really love in this little video when at the beginning they say they learn with affection and with tenderness, which I think it's also one of the important points when we talk about the sustainability. It's start developing this and putting a focus on this competencies. So all this is also because when we talk about teaching, learning with living heritage, we're talking about grounding the learning process in our learners' living heritage. And that's the starting point. And from there, drawing from the wisdom and rediscovering actually the wisdom, knowledge, experiences of our own culture. And what does this allow? We just saw it in the video, the teacher was really nicely explaining how this helps their students to connect with themselves and suddenly not feeling ashamed of speaking the language, and being able to say what they think and how do they understand life. It also helps them to connect with their communities, and start to be actors of change in these communities, because they feel committed with those communities and identify. There's a sense of belonging and identity. And there is also connecting with the territory. All living heritage are not always placed and place-based. Some territories, for example, connect with different places in the world or in the same country. But it's where we are actually, even if it's not tangible, we can connect with one another. And then also, I thought it was really nice how the teacher was saying, it also helped us to connect with others. So it's this huge challenge of how we understand where we are, what happens with where we are, and how do we understand it from school. And we also use the potential of the school of bridging, creating those bridges to connect what we live with other things that are going on in the world. And how we then feel responsible for that, and we establish that sort of dialogue. I think that I wanted to, I don't know how we are with time, Charles. I just forgot looking at the time.
You have 2 minutes, 2 more minutes.
Okay, perfect, wonderful. So I wanted to finish with just a little, I heard somebody saying at the ESD conference that UNESCO prepared in May this year. It was Arjen Walsh talking about the school as the sustainable heart of the community. And I think that all the people before me say it very nicely, and I'm sure that you even know it better than me, that living heritage for me, it's actually also a sustainable heart, because it's what gives meaning to us, to our sense of belonging and being part of something, and the culture we feel is ours, or the cultures in plural. So I was thinking, listening to him, that how beautiful it would be to connect these two hearts, no? And make them beat together. The school or the training centers as sort of as a beating heart for sustainability, and living heritage too, with all the potential it has if we ground the learning process in this. And I just wanted to finish then presenting a little tool to show these connections that we've been talking about, and the bridges that Caleb was mentioning at one point, things that Bongila did too, because I think it shows very much how we are connected, and we have this potential from living heritage to open, to expand our knowledge, to expand our experiences, and to be committed with this challenge of sustainability. But with the started with basing our experience in our own living heritage. So this is just to finish. Sorry, I'm just trying to share this here. So this is a tool that I think it's really nice to see the connections that we were talking about. So from the local to how do we connect with other living heritage, but also with how living heritage connects with other sustainable development goals, not only quality education, which actually shows the potential of grounding the learning process in our living heritage to connect education also with other aspects of sustainable development. So this tool is called Dive into Sustainable Development and Living Heritage. And as you can see, is like a sort of map of different living heritage around the world. Here we have something from different experiences, tradition of Vedic chanting, Karfia fishing in the Kerkenah Islands. So there's things around the world. And we have all the different SDGs here around. And we see, if we play a little bit with it, how, for example, here quality education is related to many, many living heritage. I found one here that was from Malawi, Sima culinary tradition of Malawi, how it was related to here, for example, it appears, I'm just showing, to the Sustainable Development Goal 2, but also to quality education and also to gender equality. And so I thought this tool could be interesting for you to discover and to explore a little bit the connection. Our living heritage, of course, this is not exhaustive. It's just the living heritage that is in the representative list of UNESCO and the lists of the convention. But it is a starting point to see those connections and to explore it. And I wanted to leave you with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Maida. Muchas gracias. Muchísimas gracias. Grounding the learning process, learning as connection. Hela and Professor Rob is always talking about that. Thank you so much for re-emphasizing that. Connecting with the learners, I think that's very important. Thank you so much. I think we want to learn more about the tool and see how best maybe we can share the tool so that we can be using it or enrich it and so forth. Thank you so much. Let me quickly move on to the next speaker, who is Professor David Cronlid, my capabilities friend. David, welcome. I'm sure Southern Africa is your second home. We played drums together. We did most of the things together, including researching, and we haven't published. There's a pending paper on capabilities. So David, for the past 20 years, has been conducting interdisciplinary ethics research around ecofeminism, mobility, climate change justice, and adaptation and education for sustainable development. He has also been working in and developing theory around cross-disciplinary sustainable development in higher education, and research developed ESD teaching and learning models and innovated process tools for problem solving in post-normal situations for municipalities and ESD agents, always in collaboration with national and international partners. Yes, that's very true. We've collaborated with David many times. So David, welcome again. Please take it away.
Thank you, Charles. And just let me say that it's wonderful to hear your voices, to see friends and colleagues, your faces. It's great. I'm sitting now in the north of Sweden at my new university, the Mid Sweden University, and I am enjoying this. So I think I'm right if my job is to sort of pick up on some of the stuff that were touched upon by the previous speakers. I need to thank you for inviting me as well, of course. I think, but I think that's, you can take that for granted, that I'm always delighted to be asked to participate in your important work. So I also want to share something.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I can do it. I just need to fix my. This is how it looks when a professor thinks. So these are my notes from today. So I have one more there, but and of course, when you listen, you start to first write down stuff that you pay attention to, and then you realize that, oh, this is too much stuff. So you start to highlight certain things, and those are the circles, the little, these ones, if you can see them, and of course they are also too many. But there are a couple of things that I wanted to touch upon that I think is important. First, if I start with Sibongele's presentation, I find this notion of transgenerationally recreated in eco-social response, this notion of a living heritage really, really important, and for certain reasons. I think that you touched upon the fact that ethics or moral systems are contextual in the sense that they are adaptable and maybe grow out of certain eco-social practices, which means, and you touched upon that, Sibo, that we cannot uncritically just take further stuff from the past that might work against certain values that we now hold for important. So I think that what I took away from your presentation is this notion of being ethically aware, and that this is not a system that we should look upon romantically, that everything that we did in the past is good stuff. I mean, we have this notion in Sweden as well, that we celebrate the traditional ways of living, but sometimes the traditional ways of living included wife beating, for example. So those gendered systems is not something that we want to keep in the basket, to speak with Daniel. So that is something that I took away, and also that the context is both time and place sensitive. So it's not only the place, it's also the time that flows through us, and that is sort of enacted in our practices. That is where this heritage takes form, so to speak. And I think that you also, which Caleb also touched upon, the important linkage between language and the real, the praxis, and the metaphorical. You spent some time, Sibongele, presenting how different expressions were mimicking real experiences or sounds, and I think that is an aspect of this field that is highly interesting and highly important to both do research on and also help students to be aware of. And that brings me to my second thought, which I think runs through all of the presentations, paying attention, being aware. Daniel talked about not being ignorant. Because what I started to think about when you guys talked was what are my stories? What are the stories told by my elders? Who am I in relationship to the stories told by my elders and the practices that I've been involved in? And I listed 3 of them, sitting around the campfire in the further north and learning how to make mugs out of birch tree. First, of course, going out in the woods and finding the birch tree and taking it home, and then started to work on it with the older father of a friend of mine. But also the stories told about around my kitchen table when I grew up. Mostly stories, quite horrible stories from my parents' upbringing, but also fun. And then when I think about them, they are stories about manhood and womanhood and how to not relate to each other as grown men and women. And also the songs that we sang all the time when we were driving the car going further south to visiting my grandparents. We have a type of song in Sweden called visa, which is always a story, and there's always a certain main character that is doing something, experiencing something. And mostly men are the main character. Not all the time, but mostly. There are no chorus in these songs, are just verses, and you follow the main character. And thinking about it, those are also stories about manhood, masculinity, femininity, what it is to relate to each other, family issues, how to take care of the kids, and so forth. And this, I tell you this because I think that there is a lack of paying attention to living in heritage in Uppsala, where I used to live, or at Uppsala University, where that is situated, that building, those buildings, what happened on that land before it became a university. How does my story, what is the story that we are maybe leaving behind us and sometimes taking with us bits and pieces of it. So I think that paying attention to the situatedness that Caleb talked about is immensely important. I think this is mainly about paying critical attention to what's in the basket. And that education, because the basket, anyone who has a basket, at least me, when I'm going out in the woods to pick berries or whatever I'm doing, I bring the basket and it's just a mess in the basket. It starts out fine with some kind of water, and then it's just buns and water and coffee, and it's spilled and there are crumbs everywhere. And I think that the past, present, and the future that Daniel talked about needs to be sorted, and that's perhaps where education can come in also, with an ethical eye as well, connecting back to Sibongile. So yeah, and another aspect when it comes to situated experiences is, of course, that learning is about connecting new information to previous experience or to experience, and that experience is not only, as Sibo pointed out very clearly, about what I experience as an individual person. It's also experiences that are enacted by me, embodied by me as a member of the community in which I live or which I come from. So giving space for those experiences, I think, has a huge pedagogical value, and it's almost as if it's unprofessional as teachers if we do not do that. And then I was, of course, intrigued by Caleb's story about on the one hand, actually one hand, the explaining phenomena from a science perspective on the one hand, and explaining the same phenomena from an indigenous knowledge system or heritage perspective on the other hand. And I think that perspective is the most important word here. If we can refrain from using a hierarchical conceptualization and put these different knowledge systems on the same level, we can use them in order to explain the same phenomena and find very useful things depending on the perspective that we take on them. I know this is a pluralist sort of pedagogical and methodological take, but I think it's important. And also the final thing I thought about, Caleb, when you talked was that it's basically an existentialist approach. Because getting to know our heritage and our friends' heritage, we also get to know ourselves and where we are. And that is perhaps the most important thing as we are going to try to make something out of the unsustainable practices in the world. That was the first paper. And then the other one, this connects also to all of you, I think, the sort of praxis, language, experience nexus. When Sibo talked, I thought about the book, my latest book, that is a critical discussion, I guess, or argument against how we speak about working with values in the Swedish school. And we speak about it. You see in the top right corner it says value foundation in citation marks. That is how we talk about ethics in the Swedish school system, that we have a value foundation that is typically Swedish, and that we need to take this further so that our young citizens embrace it, the same morality. And it's what I was thinking about when I thought about the connection between language and praxis is that in Sweden, of course, generally to the left there, building houses is necessary for survival. We need houses in order to survive. But in the north, we just don't need houses. We need to dig them deep into the ground because the ground is freezing. And if they are not deep enough, which can mean a meter or two, they will move when the ground freezes, and they will crack and then break. So it's expensive and it's a poor house because it won't shelter us anymore. So it's very clear why we started to talk about value foundation, about values as a foundation in our situatedness here in the north. Because this is a good foundation is necessary for every citizen in order to have a home. But then again, we have totally disregarded the knowledge or the way of building houses from the indigenous culture in the north, the Samis. They have what's called kota, which is a kind of a teepee made by trees or small trees like this. And of course, it has no foundation. So it will move and be adapted and adapt itself to the movements of the frozen earth, and works perfectly well because they have reindeer fur on the ground, and they have a fire in the middle, so it's warm and it's great. But we don't take that into the language of the curricula, because it's not the kind of knowledge that we value. We do not pay attention to this. We are not aware of our situation. So basically, I think it's fine to. I'm happy to see that. I think that ethics runs through all the presentations, that we need to take ethical values into consideration. And I think that is, of course, being an ethicist, I love it. I really like this movie also. to actually see how a praxis is being enacted, and also the connection to spirituality, I think, is immensely important if we interpret spirituality in a wide sense. So it's not about religion, but it's about transcendence in some sense. I haven't said much about your presentation, Daniel. It's not because I don't like it, it's because I like it too much. So I used the basket a little bit, but also your distinction between living heritage or living the heritage. I love it. Education for suitable what did you say? Education for suitable development, right? I really love that conceptualization also of education. Yeah, that's what I picked up.
Good. Thank you. Thank you for that critique. There's an element there for us to really critically look at things. You've brought that one out very nicely. Thank you so much, David. Colleagues, you can see our panelists, they are here. We assembled quite experts in this field. So let me now move on to the Q&A. I know some questions were asked and answered privately, but I think we want to learn in a learning space. We would want to share the questions and the responses too. The first one I think is from Sibo. Very interesting. I want to know, do you see people in your study changing their views towards caring of the environment in sustainable practice based on the ICH approach? I like the approach. It poses the question whether the sustainability should start with enhancing our good culture or not. Sibo, this is yours. Please, can you quickly address it?
Thank you very much, Charles. I actually have responded answered as well in the chat. But I think one thing we must recognize is that ICH is not gone. ICH exists and it metamorphoses as we go along, and it becomes congruent with the times. Because if I quickly just go back to say, with colonialism, some of the practices that people followed were peripherized and they were ridiculed, and in making space for colonial livelihoods. And if you go back and look at 1976, when Foucault talks about subjugated knowledges and the resurrecting of those knowledges. And then we see in 1987, the Brundtland Report, bringing on the issue of sustainable development and linking it with indigenous knowledge, which takes it from the classroom, from the theories of academic, and brings it into UN. And it is not until 2003 that the convention comes in. And it picks up on the momentum that has been brought about by the Brundtland Report. And it begins to take out the stigma of intangible heritage. So, and it comes at a time where people begin to recognize that there's nothing wrong with their intangible heritage. I'm giving an example where it's also just become popularized. You go to Facebook, there's a page where farmers discuss farming.
Wow.
We lose there, or did I
thought it was
lost?
Me. No, I think we've lost here. Anyway, the next one is yours, Caleb. Thank you very much for a nice presentation on IK practices. Can you clarify the link between winnowing and education for sustainable development? Over to you, Caleb.
And I also responded to that question and in typing. And my response is that winnowing, and there may not be a direct link between winnowing and education for sustainable development. but there is a direct link between winnowing and sustainable practices, where we are looking at practices that have sustained communities, individuals and communities over generations. And winnowing is one of them that has sustained people in preparation, in preparing their food, in preparing their grains, in preparing their stuff. They are able to separate mixtures through that process. So it is a sustainable practice which does not necessarily need to be paid for. People just have to know how to do it, and they do it well. And they are using the wind, a natural phenomenon, and in their own context. So that one is a sustainable practice. But then when we draw it out of that context and use it in the classroom in order to develop concepts and all those features of human life, human social life that David and Sibongile have and Maite have talked about, we are now making it education for sustainable development. It becomes part of education for sustainable development because it is now part of the learning enterprise, of the learning process. Thank you. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Caleb. I think I can also add there to bring in the issue of cognitive justice in accessing concepts. More often than not, you find that, as Caleb is saying, science concepts are taught as if they are detached from our practices. So if we relate concepts like convectional currents, etc., that we are teaching in science to our indigenous and traditional practices, it brings in an element of our kids, our learners can easily relate and easily access those scientific concepts. I thought I should add that element of justice in the acquisition of science concepts. Colleagues, I know we are 8 minutes beyond time, but so much comments given to Daniel for his basket. Daniel, I think you should write a paper here. The participants are waiting for you to unpack further the basket metaphor. And Maite, again, tool, you've given us a link, am I right? What I would want to hear from you, Maite, is can we add that tool to our website without any other protocols to follow?
All right.
Oh, Charles, yes. The links are actually, it's available to everybody. So I can just share with you the links and you can just put it in the website, and like that, everybody can explore at their own pace and interest.
Okay. Colleagues, thank you so much. Daniel, we're waiting for a paper. Hayla, we are 10 minutes beyond time. Any closing remarks, any housekeeping issues from you? Prof. Hayla, is he in? No, I don't think so. Yes, she's in. Hayla, can you unmute?
Charles?
Yes, you're back.
Sorry, Charles. Sorry, Charles, I just missed that. Somebody was just here in my office.
I'm saying any closing remarks, any housekeeping issues, any remarks from you before we close?
No, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to this incredible panel. It's been such a lovely session. I've been enjoying every part of it as we've moved across the system here. So thank you so much to all of you. And David, it's been lovely that you could join us all the way from Sweden. Sibu, with your foot in South Africa and in Eswatini. Sorry, my office is a bit noisy here. Let me just move out. Oops, sorry. Sorry, there's just a lot happening here this morning. Yes, and just to say thank you very much to everybody. I think we had the lovely session yesterday with Rob, who opened up some of the dimensions of heritage into our pedagogy and assessment work. Today, we dived right deeply into living heritage. And I loved Maite's metaphor of, the heart. It's the beating heart of education, because it helps all of us and the children and the students and everybody to, find ourselves in education and to be able to, from there, find and make sense of new knowledge, as Caleb was showing us so beautifully. So this is a very, very exciting area of education for all of us. And I think if you look into the change projects that have already been done, I'm sure Charles will show people as we go forward. There's been some fantastic change projects that are, bringing living heritage and ESD together, and not seeing them as separate things, but actually as part of this integrated whole that Mighty was also talking about. So thank you very much, everybody. It's been a very exciting morning for me to see everybody on this platform, to see this work coming together so beautifully. And David, thank you for the lovely comments that you, and reflective way in which you joined our conversation this morning, all the way from the north of Sweden.
Yes.
So yeah, so Charles, I think that's fine. Tomorrow we will have the session on the assessment of significant learning. And we are trying to develop innovative tools to think about how to assess this work, because some of the traditional tools are not always adequate, although, as Rob showed us yesterday, we still need to use them, but we need to expand them. So we have Professor Shumba who will join us tomorrow, and we'll have one or two people from the Fundisa for Change team. They are also a little bit busy this week because we have the National Environmental Skills Summit here. But we are working with them, and we will be looking at assessment tomorrow. So I know most of us don't love assessment because it always creates a lot of stress for us, but it's so nice when we start to think more creatively about assessment and what assessment can actually do in terms of being a very productive part of the learning process. So thank you very much to everybody. Thank you, Charles, for your fantastic chairing as always. And I wanted Mighty to meet you, so perhaps you can open your video, Charles.
Yes.
Say hello to us so that next time Mighty sees you, she'll know you.
Yes.
I would be delighted that next time is in South Africa. Or in somewhere.
Hi, Mighty. So we're going to talk. We want your tool. We want to work together. Thank you so much.
Yes, okay. So thank you, everybody, and have a good day further.
Thank you, colleagues. Goodbye.
Disasters create large humanitarian and development challenges. The frequency and severity of disasters have increased over the last few years, also as a result of climate change. More than 226 million people are affected by disasters every year. More than 680,000 people died in earthquakes between 2000 and 2010, mainly due to poorly constructed buildings. Since 1980, drought and associated famine have claimed nearly 558,000 lives and affected more than 1.6 billion people. Cyclones, hurricanes and typhoons affect 37 million people. It is thus important to keep in mind that disasters are not natural. They only occur when people lack preparedness or the ability to cope with hazards. We can use the following formula. While education systems are greatly affected by disasters, they are also part of and after disasters. Education has a vital role to play in preparing communities and building disaster-resilient societies and safe lives. Schools should be built to be disaster-proof. In the case of Japan, this saved many children who survived because they were in school. Disaster risk reduction should be introduced into school curricula and programs. This will ensure that learners understand the causes and consequences of disasters and know how to act when a disaster strikes. Learners should also participate, for example, in mapping school hazards, risks and vulnerabilities around them, and in developing school disaster preparation plans. This gives them the opportunity to learn by doing, as well as testing their newly acquired knowledge in practice. The entire learning community should work on safety measures in preparation for a disaster. It is our hope that as many countries will integrate disaster risk reduction into the planning and construction of their facilities, the management of their schools, as well as in their curricula and programs. UNESCO provides the tools for integrating disaster risk reduction into schools. Let's use these tools and get active today.